She strode into the elegant dining hall, certain that the universe would instantly kneel before her, until an echo from her past shattered that illusion, proving that not every portal yields to mere riches. Inside, the establishment exuded a refined sophistication that murmured wealth in subtle tones, eschewing gaudy displays. No overabundant crystal chandeliers nor ostentatious gilded menus could rival the serene, understated opulence discernible only to those of its inner circle. Catherine Langley entered with the air of absolute dominion, convinced that if she couldn't command this establishment, then surely she reigned over all similar havens. Her heels clicked on polished floors as she barely acknowledged the attendant. Her gaze swept the room in a silent tally, discerning who was worthy and who was not. Clad in a crisply tailored ivory ensemble paired with a silk blouse tinted in a deliberately subdued off-white, a hue chosen precisely to defy the banality of pure white, she adorned her ears with modest diamond studs, their brilliance artfully designed to capture attention. Her every movement exuded a natural air of entitlement, honed by years of effortlessly commanding others to attend to her whims without hesitation. The hostess, a young woman with polite, inscrutable eyes, smiled and said, "Good evening, madam. Do you have a reservation?" Catherine barely registered the inquiry. With brisk precision she declared, "Langley, table by the window." The attendant keyed in the name on the system, nodded, and escorted her through the dining area. The dining room, neither teeming nor barren, resonated with hushed chatter that mingled with soft jazz. Couples celebrated anniversaries, businessmen engaged in hushed dialogues, and a cluster of women shared boisterous laughter over cocktails. With fluid grace, Catherine eased into her chair, every gesture rehearsed. The window's light bathed her in a perfect glow, silently affirming her rightful place in such refined surroundings. Yet, as she settled, a slight stir in the room's corner snagged her attention. A waiter, menu in hand, approached. She barely spared him a glance, yet his face would soon imprint itself in her memory. A gentle greeting, "Good evening, madam. I am Daniel, and I shall attend to your needs tonight." The natural, effortless warmth of his voice was evident, yet Catherine offered little acknowledgement. Her eyes flickered upward for a mere heartbeat before resuming their focus on the menu. With a flip of the page, she instructed, "I'd like sparkling water, chilled, with no lemon. And ensure the glass remains free of condensation. I detest that." Daniel, ever impeccable in his bearing, offered a slight nod. "Certainly, madam. Shall I recite tonight's specials?" Catherine sighed, not bothering to hide her impatience. "Just bring me the list. I don't like when waiters recite them, it takes too long." A nearly imperceptible pause, just a heartbeat's length, occurred, the sort that only an observer adept at deciphering human cues would note, when sheer professionalism momentarily eclipsed personal pride. "Absolutely, madam," he replied. Daniel's response was measured and even, as he set a modest leather-bound menu before her and gracefully retreated a step. Catherine offered no thanks. It was not her habit to do so for such trivialities. She perused the choices, drumming a meticulously manicured nail on the table as she ordered, "The filet, medium rare with no sauce. Ensure it's truly medium rare, not oozing red upon the plate." She paused, then glanced at him briefly, and said, "I'd like someone more experienced handling my order." The words struck her with unexpected force. Daniel's hands remained at his sides, his fingers relaxed and expression unreadable, yet the atmosphere subtly transformed. Just a few tables over, a wine-sipping woman paused mid-breath, a man momentarily lifted his gaze from his phone, and even a busboy, busy clearing a table nearby, decelerated his actions, as if attuned to the unfolding drama. Daniel remained composed. "We have a highly trained staff, ma'am. Your meal will be prepared and served with the highest standards." Catherine released a sharp exhale as she closed the menu, muttering, "I certainly hope so." She retrieved her phone, effectively dismissing him, yet the dialogue lingered. It was far from concluded. Daniel pivoted and strode toward the kitchen with deliberate, measured steps, his face remaining inscrutable, yet Catherine's parting words clung to him, draping the room in an unseen, pervasive mist. A gentleman at the bar adjusted his seat, his eyes momentarily darting toward Catherine before averting. Meanwhile, at a secluded table, a middle-aged couple shared furtive glances, silently weighing the merits of intervening. Unperturbed, Catherine scrolled through her phone, her demeanor as detached as if she'd never once doubted her rightful station. She remained oblivious to the whispered murmurs and the subtle shift in the room's ambience. Moments later, Daniel reappeared with a flawless glass of ice-chilled sparkling water set before her. Its pristine, condensation-free exterior silently affirmed his impeccable adherence to her specifications. She grasped the glass, sipped cautiously, and then lowered it with a disapproving frown. "This water is merely at room temperature." Daniel maintained an unwavering tone. "The water has been cooled to our establishment standard, madam." Catherine responded with a sharp exhale and a disapproving shake of her head. "Your standard fails me, fetch me another, immediately." After a brief pause, Daniel offered a single nod before departing toward the adjacent table. Nearby, an older gentleman leaned toward his spouse, murmuring softly. She responded with a firm nod, her lips set in a resolute line. The ambience had shifted, and Catherine was gradually becoming aware. She lifted her eyes from her phone, sensing the room's subtle strain, the muted unease, the prolonged glances, yet before she could fathom it, a new voice sliced through the murmur. "Is there an issue here?" inquired the voice, not raised, nor harsh, yet imbued with a gravity that compelled every head to pivot. When Catherine finally met that gaze, her complexion drained, and her hold on the phone grew unyieldingly tight. The figure before her was neither a server nor an overseer. He sported no uniform apron, nor did he bear any tray. He wore a sharply tailored charcoal suit, so impeccably fitted that it defied off-the-rack mediocrity. Devoid of any name tag or clipboard, his mere presence radiated authority without overt demands. It was a presence that neither clamored for attention nor whispered for it, it simply dominated the space. She swallowed, her throat parched. "Is there a problem here?" he reiterated, his tone velvety yet resolute. Her eyes flitted to his face as she scrutinized him with an unfamiliar intensity, though his bearing echoed that of Daniel in some elusive way. His features, his posture, she struggled to pinpoint the recognition. He sat up straighter, concealing any hint of the uncertainty that had just brushed her thoughts. "Catherine," barely registering, "I expect a particular standard of service when dining," she remarked evenly, "and your attendant appears to fall short of that mark." He shifted his gaze briefly to Daniel before returning it to her, his demeanor unaltered. "I understand," he observed, then slid the chair opposite her before seating himself, asking, "Pray, what precisely troubles you?" Catherine blinked, unaccustomed to this new dynamic. She had always encountered managers who would grovel with apologies, proffer complimentary sweets, and scramble to set things right. She laid her phone aside, her stance rigidening. "This water is tepid, and I do not welcome being challenged by your staff. When I request something, I expect it to be promptly delivered," she declared. He inclined his head subtly, his eyes piercing yet inscrutable, then gradually leaned in, propping his elbows upon the table. "Tell me, Catherine, do you recall who I am?" The inquiry struck her like a jolt, his nonchalant intonation of her name, as though endowed with an inherent claim, as if they were lifelong acquaintances. Her heart raced. "Should I?" she inquired curtly. He allowed the query to hover between them for an extra moment before, with deliberate slowness, unfastening his watch and rolling up his sleeves. Catherine's breath hitched as a memory surfaced, the delicate scar on his left forearm, a subtle, almost imperceptible line that was anything but ambiguous. Her mind spun, straining to decipher the memory, to transcend the years, decades, and the meticulously maintained chasm separating her history from her now, and then, as if struck by a frigid cascade, recognition crashed over her. "Nathan!" A deliberate, somber smile unfurled as he adjusted his cuff. "Nathan was once my business partner, my dearest friend, the very man who, alongside your husband, forged the empire of Langley Enterprises before circumstances ousted him." A pang coiled in Catherine's gut. She was all too familiar with this tale. Nathan Richards, incisive, methodical, and fiercely ambitious, had garnered the admiration of her husband, Charles. Together, they had forged an empire, bound by trust. Yet, as the company surged and authentic fortune began to pour in, the dynamics shifted irrevocably. Catherine never dared to question the unfolding. She refrained from inquiring into the particulars, indifferent to those sacrificed along the way. Nathan had long been absent, until now. Indeed, he had never truly vanished, but rather had re-emerged, leaving her throat constricted. I never knew," he admitted softly. "Naturally, you were unaware," he added, his voice calm yet now tinged with a sharp undertone. "You never needed to know," he continued. "While you ascended the social ladder, my family was forced to start over, without the enterprise we once built, without the wealth your husband secured by excluding us." A piercing silence fell between them. Her fingers tightened around the linen napkin in her lap, as if clinging to an anchor in a storm. She was unaccustomed to being scrutinized or judged. She had long navigated circles of commanding men, those who unilaterally charted the paths of destiny without a moment's hesitation. But tonight, she found herself stripped of that command, and that stark truth weighed upon her heart like an unyielding boulder. She grasped her water glass, not out of parched need, but merely to occupy trembling fingers. As she raised it, the liquid gently swirled, her hold unexpectedly firm. He sipped, compelling himself to lock eyes with Malcolm in a vain attempt to reclaim his dominion, but the scales remained unbalanced. Malcolm reclined comfortably in his chair, one arm casually draped over the table. His face, inscrutable yet composed, betrayed no sign of agitation or emotion. He was undeniably in control. "It seems you're seeking an escape from all this," he remarked, tilting his head ever so slightly, as though attempting to reset the unfolding moment, to erase it entirely. Catherine snapped, exhaling sharply, "I am under no obligation to endure a lecture." Malcolm waved toward the dining room, adding, "If you wish to depart, feel free, no one will bar your exit." Her jaw clenched in resignation. Indeed, she could rise, collect her belongings, and depart. The valet would summon her car, and in 20 minutes, she'd return to her impeccably styled apartment, complete with towering windows and meticulous decor. Yet, she remained rooted. For if she departed at that moment, the tale would be spun, the affluent woman who abruptly exited when questioned, the one who found herself mute when met with unvarnished truth. Instead, true to her nature, she deflected. "You appear to have prospered admirably," she remarked, compelling her tone to adopt a measured calm, befitting someone occupying such an impressive venue. Malcolm emitted a soft chuckle, his head shaking gently. "You're persisting in that same deflection. At least you're remaining seated," he continued, "which exceeds what I had anticipated." Her fingers fidgeted against the napkin in her lap, yet she remained silent. For once, words eluded her. The atmosphere in the dining room had grown denser, imbued with a palpable, unspoken strain. Catherine pondered whether it was Malcolm's formidable presence or the emerging epiphany bearing down on her, like an invisible force. For years, she had entered such establishments, expecting unwavering deference in the treatment to which she was accustomed, yet tonight, those very assumptions lay in ruins. She exhaled in a measured breath, placing her glass down with deliberate precision. "What is it that you desire from me?" she inquired, her tone softening. Malcolm's face remained inscrutable. "I want nothing from you, Catherine," he said, leaning in as he continued, "This isn't about me, it never has been. It's about whether, for the first time in your life, you're prepared to view yourself as the world does. You think this is about history." His voice was calm. "This isn't history, Catherine, it's your present, right now. In this moment, you are exactly who you've always been, the same woman who once reigned at the pinnacle without ever questioning her ascent, the same woman who can, with a single glance, decree a man unworthy." Catherine's mouth tightened into a firm line. "You're twisting this into something it isn't." "I am," Malcolm stated, his gaze fixed on hers with unwavering resolve. "Tell me, what precisely compelled your decision? Was it Daniel's inexperience, his bearing, his service? Or was there another factor at play?" The remark struck her like a blow, her pulse quickened, and a flush of heat crept along her neck. "I am under no obligation to justify myself to you," she retorted sharply. "No, you don't," he concurred with a slight nod. A lingering pause fell, and for the first time, someone was prompting her to speak. The silence between them weighted more heavily than any words spoken before. For the very first time, Catherine sensed the burden of every pair of eyes upon her, not solely Malcolm's, but the accumulated scrutiny of a lifetime witnessed by many. She had long commanded the room, her entrance, a declaration, her presence, a force that decided who merited deference, but tonight, she found herself stripped of that command. She exhaled in a measured breath, placing her glass down with deliberate precision. "Whatever you want from me, what is it?" she asked, her voice now subdued. Malcolm's face remained inscrutable. "I want nothing from you, Catherine," he said, leaning in as he continued, "This isn't about me, it never has been. It's about whether, for the first time in your life, you're prepared to view yourself as the world does. You think this is about history," he continued evenly, "but it isn't. This is your present, your reality right now. You remain the same woman who once ruled unchallenged, who could, with a single glance, decide another man was beneath her." Catherine's lips pressed into a thin line. "You're twisting this into something it isn't." "I am," Malcolm replied. "Tell me, what precisely compelled your decision? Was it Daniel's inexperience, his bearing, his service? Or was there another factor entirely?" The remark struck her like a blow, her pulse surged, a flush creeping along her neck. "I am under no obligation to justify myself to you," she snapped. "No, you don't," he agreed, nodding slightly. A lingering pause fell, and for the first time, someone was prompting her to speak. The silence between them weighted more heavily than any words spoken before. For the very first time, Catherine sensed the burden of every pair of eyes upon her, not solely Malcolm's, but the accumulated scrutiny of a lifetime witnessed by many. She had long navigated circles of commanding men, those who unilaterally charted the paths of destiny without a moment's hesitation, but tonight, she found herself stripped of that command. She exhaled in a measured breath, placing her glass down with deliberate precision. "The water, the service, what do you want from me?" she asked, her voice softening further. Malcolm's face remained unchanged. "I want nothing from you, Catherine," he said, leaning in. "This isn't about me, it never has been. It's about whether, for the first time in your life, you're ready to see yourself as the world does." The waiter, Daniel, passed by their table. Catherine glanced at him, truly seeing him this time, not as a mere fixture in the backdrop, nor simply as a servant, but as an individual, and the realization was bitter. Malcolm pushed his chair back, stood up, adjusted his sleeve, and simply said, "Enjoy your meal." Then he turned and walked away, leaving Catherine alone with her turbulent thoughts. She felt the crushing weight of the moment upon her chest, the inescapable finality, the disquieting truth that clung relentlessly. And perhaps, in that vulnerable moment, the seed of something genuine had been planted. Once certain of her dominion, Catherine had walked into that restaurant with unyielding confidence, but by the time she left, doubt had crept in. How often do we traverse life without questioning the echoes of our words, actions, and assumptions? How frequently do we sidestep the sting of honest reflection, content to pretend there is nothing left to learn? Perhaps, in the quiet aftermath of a challenge, there lies an invitation to truly see ourselves, a mirror reflecting not our desires, but our realities. Sometimes, the most transformative lessons come unbidden, urging us to change in ways we never imagined.